Ever since the internet was created, it introduced a new way of viewing the world. Any wonders or questions one may have are answered in a matter of seconds, just by a simple Google search. But not everything you see on the web is user-friendly. A few clicks can lead you down a rabbit hole of dark, cruel content. Most people shy away from the dark side of humanity, but some just can't stop looking, and they have no clue why. This is their morbid reality. This is William Bradford Bishop. He's married to Catherine Bishop. They have 3 sons together. He's a successful government foreign service officer, married his high school sweetheart, and has a beautiful family by her. Bradford seemed to be living the American dream. Everyone around the Bishops couldn't see a tad bit of trouble within them. But what happened on March 1st, 1976, shocked the nation and left so many unanswered questions. On the night of March 1st, Bradford would begin his heinous demise of his entire family. After tucking the boys into bed, Catherine Bishop would be standing by the front door when Bradford bludgeoned her to death with a hammer. He then went to each of the boys' rooms, one by one while they were sleeping, and beat them to death the same way. Bradford's mother was also living in the residence with the family at the time. She had been walking the family dog during all of this. He waited until she got back and bludgeoned her to death. He then rolled all the bodies into a tarp and put them into the back of the car, bringing the family dog alongside him. He drove more than 5 hours from Bethesda, Maryland, where he stopped at Tyrrell County in North Carolina. He found a very rural area to dig a shallow grave big enough for his entire family. He then poured gasoline on them and lit the grave on fire. The fire he started happened to turn into a forest fire. It was spotted by a forest ranger about 5 to 6 hours later. The ranger called in emergency services to put the fire out, but unknowingly to them, they would be stumbling into a burning grave. Back at the Bradfords' residence, neighbors and family started to grow suspicious of their absence. The mail and newspapers had started to build up in front of the house. This was a last-telling sign for a neighbor to call the police. Just a couple steps into the Bradfords' residence, law enforcement knew something horrible had happened. Blood and human tissue covered the entire home. This led to an urgent hunt for the family's whereabouts. The family would soon be connected to a local hardware store in Jackson, North Carolina. They were contacted after the bodies of 3 boys and 2 women were found in a forest fire in Tyrrell County. No one in North Carolina could identify the victims. At the burial site, Bradford left a gas can and a shovel. The gas can was later traced to a hardware store in Bethesda, Maryland. The same city the Bradford family home was discovered bloodied. Soon law enforcement put the 2 together and were able to identify the bodies in Tyrrell County to be Bradford's 3 sons, aged 5, 10, and 14, and the 2 women, his wife and mother. This left one person missing, Bradford Bishop. Soon a nationwide manhunt would begin. They would discover Bishop was spotted at a sports store in Jacksonville, North Carolina, just hours after the disposal of his family. He was accompanied by an unknown woman and what was believed to be the family dog. On March 18, 1976, a couple weeks after the bodies were found in Tyrrell County, Bradford's station wagon was found 400 miles away in the Smoky Mountains National Park, but Bradford was nowhere to be found. The next day, a grand jury indicted Bradford on 5 counts of first-degree murder. Despite the nationwide manhunt for Bradford, he seemingly vanished into thin air, never to be seen again. In 2014, 38 years after the murders, Bradford was added to the FBI's 10 most wanted list, but was later removed after the added spotlight led to no leads. Nearly 50 years later, no one knows his whereabouts, the motive behind the murders, or if he's even alive. If alive today, he'd be 87 years old. The fingerprint. It's an impression left by the friction ridges of a human finger. It's been the standard way of identifying one's identity in the United States. But it wasn't always this way. Before fingerprints, in the early 1900s, the way of identifying an individual was through the Birdie system. This was a French-originated technique where they used photographs and measurements of specific physical characteristics in order to accurately identify the person. The demise of this system would swiftly begin after a freaky incident occurred in a Kansas prison. On May 1, 1903, an African-American man named Will West entered the United States Penitentiary at Leavenworth on the indictment of murder. Like any other new prisoner, West was subjected to the standard admission procedure. Prison clerks took photographs, a physical description, and 11 anthropometric measurements. Using West's measurements and description, he matched another prisoner by the name of William West, who had a previous conviction for murder. Although everything matched, Will denied that he was this man. The record keeper then went to the file of William West and returned with his card measurements and photo ID. The man in the photo looked exactly like Will. This card was shown to Will, who stared in amazement. He stated, "That's my picture, but I don't know where you got it. For all I know, I've never been here before." The record clerk turned the card over and read the information given, including the statements that the man on the card happened to be already serving a life sentence at the same institution for the same charge: murder. The second West was then called up to meet the other West, and he looked shockingly confused like the other one. The two men were not only seemingly identical in appearance, but also in age, height, weight, complexion, eye color, hair color, and even shoe size. They initially thought measuring their body parts would for sure distinguish the two men, but found out their measurements were almost identical. This is when the prison warden discovered the fingerprints of Will West and William West bore no resemblance. The flaws of the Birdie system was now displayed by this one case. The value of fingerprints as a means of identification was then established. The following video is a reminder of how unpredictable life can be, so don't take it for granted. In the early morning of August 4, 2021, in New Jersey, Officer John Nunez would pull a car over after spotting it, recklessly driving and running red lights.
You can shut the car off and give me your license, registration, and insurance, please.
In the car would be 24-year-old Luis Fernando and 27-year-old Alexis Rodriguez. Luis is cordial with Nunez. He follows orders and gives him his license and registration, as asked. Alexis could be seen clearly intoxicated, telling Nunez that this was their first date and blaming the whole thing on herself.
Almost killing each other is not the way to start on a first date.
Because it just got really carried away.
I know.
It's my fault. It's really my fault. I swear.
It's not your fault.
Eventually, around 2:02 a.m., Luis would be allowed to drive off after receiving 3 tickets for reckless driving, failure to observe a flashing traffic signal, and violation of restrictions on a provisional license.
No, it's my fault.
Listen, you're getting 3 tickets. I could have gave you a lot more, okay? You're not even supposed to be driving at this time because you have a provisional license.
Oh my God.
So you're getting reckless. I didn't give you speeding. I'm giving you that break, all right? You got reckless, the traffic light that you ran, and for driving after hours. All right, man?
Thank you.
Get home safe.
10 minutes later, Officer Nunez would hear over his radio that it's been an accident near, involving a tractor trailer. He approaches the scene and instantly is in shock.
Yo, this is the same kid. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. 6-1.
Only 10 minutes after he pulled Luis and Alexis over, they were dead after smashing into a trailer truck. This is Peter and Joan Porco. Both resided in Bethlehem, New York, where they met at the University at Albany. Soon after meeting, they fell in love while pursuing their careers. They would go on to have 2 children together. Oldest son Jonathan was a Navy officer in South Carolina, while youngest son Christopher would be studying economics at the University of Rochester. The Porcos seemed to be doing great. Wealthy parents, big house, both sons are pursuing their own careers, and so on. This seemingly happy life the Porcos lived would soon come crashing down for the world to see. On Monday, November 15th, 2004, Peter Porco would get out of his bed and start his daily morning routine for work. He went to the bathroom and brushed his teeth. Then he went downstairs to pack the dishwasher and pack his lunch. After this, he went outside to get the newspapers. As he was walking back, he noticed he made a silly mistake. He locked himself outside. Luckily, they had a spare key under the pod out front he could use to get back in. He let himself back in, and seconds later he collapsed to the floor, dead. Unknowingly to Peter, his youngest son Christopher viciously attacked him and his wife with an axe while they slept at night. Peter was able to get up and go on about his morning routine without knowing he had been bludgeoned over the head with an axe 16 times before succumbing to his wounds. When Peter failed to show up for work, it was extremely out of character. They made several calls to him but made no contact. They sent law enforcement out to the Porco's residence to see what's going on. This is when they made the gruesome discovery. They found Peter dead in a pool of his own blood in front of the door. Joan Porco was viciously wounded in the upstairs bedroom, but alive. They immediately started to ask Joan questions, but she couldn't speak any words due to her face being disfigured, so they communicated with her through head nods. They asked her, "Was the person who did this a family member?" She shook her head, yes. They then asked her, "Was it Jonathan?" She nodded her head no. Then they asked her, "Was it Christopher?" She shook her head yes. She was rushed to the hospital, where she miraculously was able to make a recovery, but not a full one. Her head and face had been disfigured badly. She lost an eye and suffered severe brain damage due to the attack. At this time, Christopher Porco had already drove 4 hours away, back to the University of Rochester, when he gets the news from a local paper that his parents had been murdered. He then calls the police in Bethlehem, and it went like this.
Bethlehem Police Dispatcher, Saginaw.
Hi, my name is Chris Porco. I was just called by the Times-Union saying that my parents were found dead this afternoon. I was wondering if you had any information for me.
Hey, Chris, whereabouts are you?
I'm at school in Rochester, New York.
Okay, and are you in a dorm there?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
After this, both him and his older brother Jonathan rushed to the hospital in Bethlehem, where Joan was being treated. Police would start questioning Chris's whereabouts during the time of the murders. He told investigators that he was at the University of Rochester all night, where he slept in the dorm lounge. Investigators asked the students in the lounge if Chris had in fact been there. No one could recall seeing Jonathan at the university that night. But Christopher's bright yellow Jeep was spotted leaving the university around 10:30 p.m. A neighbor of the Porcos told investigators that they seen Chris's Jeep at the Porcos' residence the morning of the attack. Chris would soon be charged for the murder of his father Peter and the attempted murder of his mother Joan. It seemed like a cut and clear case, but it wasn't. They had a strong case against Chris. They had his own mother's account of him being there, but in a twist of events, she would go on to be in denial that her son could do that. After recovering, Joan was able to talk and walk again. She went on to write a letter to the local paper and stated that she could not in fact remember anything from that night. She also stated she didn't believe her beloved son Christopher could have done anything like that to his parents. However, this testimony wouldn't hold much weight, because in 2006, nearly 2 years after the attacks, Christopher Porco was found guilty of second-degree murder of Peter and second-degree attempted murder of Joan. He was sentenced to 50 years to life. He'll be eligible for parole in 2056. Edgar Allan Poe, a highly influential poet and author, who is credited with creating the detective mystery genre as we know it. But it's been one frightening, eerie mystery surrounding his first and only completed novel. In 1838, Poe would publish his first novel, named The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket. The novel told the story of a ship that was hit by a severe storm after exploring Antarctic regions. It claims the life of everyone on board, except a young sailor named Richard Parker and 3 of his companions. Food would become scarce quickly as days drifted by. Starvation would hit the crew hard. They soon suggested that a crew member must be sacrificed in order to save others. The character Richard Parker would be the one to be sacrificed. Thanks to him, the rest are able to survive. At face value, this novel sounds like a cool and chilling story, but it reached a new level of darkness when something eerily similar happened 46 years later. But in the real world. In 1884, 4 men in Southampton, England would board a ship. The crew included a captain, 2 experienced seamen, and a 19-year-old boy. They encountered a storm that tore open the ship, leading to it actively sinking. This made the 4 deploy an emergency lifeboat. While being safe from the sinking ship, they forgot to grab food and water. This was a lethal error. They drifted for days without food or water. After 18 days of burning starvation and thirst, they began to talk about who would be sacrificed for the group. They would all agree for the 19-year-old boy to perish. The 19-year-old just so happened to be named Richard Parker, the same name as the young boy sacrificed in Poe's novel, 46 years earlier.